Hey folks, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson of HuskerBigRed.com, and joining me as always is my co-host Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. And we're back here on a Friday, a victory Friday, after the Nebraska Cornhuskers notch a huge win in basketball over Iowa, just dominating the Hawkeyes. So that was a big victory in the vault. We'll talk a little bit about some recruiting. We got AJ Allen, saying he's coming back. Colton Feast, is on the way out the door. So we'll offer our thoughts on all of that. But first, Danny, what were your gut reactions to a huge win for Fred Hoiberg and the Huskers last night?
It was a fun thirsty Thursday, except this time I'm not hungover or I didn't drink too much. I was completely sober and I got drunk off the Nebraska basketball victory. That's not something I've been able to say recently. Recently meaning the last couple of years. I mean, it's the first time Nebraska has beaten Iowa since the 2019-20 season, I believe. So, I am very happy. Monday we talked about this being a big game, and it was, and the boys stepped up.
Yeah, and I mean, it really was all about the defense too. All five guys in the starting lineup, scored in double figures. CJ Wilcher had a big night. Hit some threes. Was 3 of 6 from deep. But I mean, this was mostly to me about the defense. I mean, they held Iowa to 50 points, and Iowa has one of the better offenses in the Big Ten. I mean, they've always been known for, kind of under Fran McCaffrey for having, that dynamic offense. And I think they shot like 26% from the field. And I mean, Nebraska held them to under 30%, from the field and from 3-point range. I mean, so that they just did a spectacular job. They beat them up on the boards. Juwan Gary was fantastic. Sam Griesel was fantastic. Derek Walker had a few too many turnovers, but, did a great job, on the defensive end and on the glass. And it was just a hard fought victory. And it was one that this team really needed. But man, it makes you feel a little more optimistic kind of going into the meat of this Big Ten schedule.
It reminded me a lot of the Creighton game, a fast shooting team in Creighton that loves to play in transition and is not afraid to shoot the 3-pointer. And the best way to neutralize that defensively is to play a slower pace of game. And, that's exactly what Nebraska basketball did on the offensive end. They played a slower pace of game, and they mentioned it in the broadcast, and it is so very true. Nebraska has two players that they can run the offense through, or two players that can calm the offense down, in Derek Walker and Sam Griesel. And the thing I like about this team is that and Fran McCaffrey even said it in his press conference. They're playing for each other. They're not playing hero ball, and that allows the offense to slow down, get set, take their shots, and take high percentage shots, and not just one-on-one fadeaways from 70 feet from the basket. So, I mean, they have a formula defensively, which is basically just attack and rotate quickly, and that combined with the slower pace of play, I think really works in their favor. And you talked about Fred Hoiberg, finding athletes that can play Big Ten basketball and that gritty, type of game. I think Thursday we saw a little bit of that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, Jawan Gary's been huge, in these types of games and, his kind of defensive, versatility. He can guard different guys. And, that's what's really great about this team. I mean, you've got Derek Walker who can guard big, we saw him go up against Zach Edey, and I thought he did, more than held his own. I mean, Nebraska really was one bad call away from knocking off the number one team in the country. So, I mean,
Don't
this
remind me.
yeah, it's just it's really impressive though how far this program I think has come in this last year, and I think Fred's finally starting to figure out how to win in the Big Ten. And I mean, yes, you need to be able to shoot the ball and hit threes and stuff, but you got to be able to play defense, and that's what this team just wasn't able to do. Kind of the first 3 years under Hoiberg, and that's just done a total 360 where it looks like one of the better defensive teams in the Big Ten right now, and that length with having Griesel and Gary and all those guys, it is a huge factor. And, you kind of touched on it, but Sam Griesel has just brought such a huge presence to this team as the point guard. He can facilitate, he can score in the low post. He gets good shots. I mean, Nebraska turned it over a little too much last night, like 16% of their possessions, and they did turnovers, which is why, it was probably a closer game than, it could have been. I mean, Nebraska really could have won this game by 20, and they almost did. It really wasn't, the second half really wasn't that exciting. It was pretty much, set in stone in the last few minutes. And, so it's not like everything's perfect on this team. Kaisei, didn't shoot the ball well. And that's, they kind of need him to do that to, reach their ceiling offensively. But man, if you can hold people to 50 points and if you can hold Iowa to 50 points, you're going to have a chance in almost every single Big Ten game. And I think we're going to see Nebraska be competitive in a lot of these, and hopefully, they can win them and maybe get to some postseason basketball this year.
But that's the thing. Kesey didn't have his best game, and yet they were still able to find other ways to score. And I think that goes back to the balance of the team, and that's not something that we've had a ton of in past years either. And, I'm kind of starting to see the type of player that Wilhelm Bredenbach is going to be. I thought he was going to be the silky post scoring, big man, but that's not who he is. And that is perfectly okay because what he does is he brings energy on the floor defensively. I see him diving for loose balls all the time. He is active in trying to get rebounds. I believe he had 7 last night. And
Yep.
so, although he's not the silky post scorer that I thought he was going to be or the dominant big man down low, he brings this type of grit and energy, and you can't fault him for not trying. I've never seen a possession where I'm like, "Oh man, he's not trying. Get him out of there immediately." So I'm happy he's been able to find a role because quite honestly, I was a little bit down on him coming into this season, and even at the beginning of the season, I wasn't sure where he fit. Now it's becoming clearer about where he fits on this team.
Yeah, they've got, they don't have a long bench, but they've got everybody kind of defined into their roles. Wilhelm coming off the bench, Kaisai, and then, Denham Dawson, I think can give him some solid minutes in the backcourt, especially as a defender. But yeah, I mean, those guys in the starting lineup, they really stepped up. Derek Walker, I mean, not Derek Walker, Wilcher hit 3 threes, and then Gary and Greasel both hit a couple. Derek Walker had his usual, 5 for 9. Wasn't a spectacular effort, offensively for him. But, just when you have somebody that you can throw the ball to in the post that can score 60% of the time, it gets good shots for everybody else. And it just, I mean, you can see all the pieces that, the way that they built this thing, through the transfer portal and with the pieces they had on the roster, they all fit together really well. And I think, with the leadership, from Greisel and, even from Fred Hoiberg, I think it's just everything is just kind of fits well together. And then, like you said, these guys are playing for each other. And, I'm excited to watch them play. I know that, that they might not win every game, but I know that they're going to come out and play solid basketball. And, they got Michigan State on the road next. And that's going to be a challenging game, but there's not any game on the schedule that I don't think Nebraska can win. I mean, I think they proved that against Purdue. I mean, yeah, playing Purdue on the road is a different animal, but they've if you can play against Purdue, you can play against anybody in the Big Ten.
And Pinnacle Bank Arena is becoming a tough place to play again. The place was rocking last night. Then I remember the Purdue game. The place was absolutely wild. And, it's a lot easier when you have a team that's likable and a team that you want to cheer for. And so I think this team, I'm not going to say they're going to win it all or anything like that, but, they're a very competitive team. They're a gritty team. And, last night was huge. I mean, last night was a huge win because it gave Nebraska kind of a good blueprint of what they need to do, and it also gave Nebraska a much needed conference win. And quite honestly, if I'm Fred Hoiberg, I look at, a guy like Sam Griesel, who unfortunately we only have for 1 year, and I say this is the type of point guard that I need to run my offense, not the flashy scoring point guard necessarily, because we have other guys on the roster that can do that, but a guy that can facilitate, still score, but make sure that everybody is involved. And it's great to see kind of everybody feeding off each other instead of just a jumbled mix of 5 stars playing hero ball like we have in past years, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it just those guys are nice, and those pieces. I mean, yeah, Bryce McGowan is a really great
Yeah,
basketball
absolutely.
player, but he wasn't ready to run a Big Ten basketball team and defend and do all the little things that you have to. And I think that we're seeing that this year. It's all the little things. Offensive rebounding has been huge for Nebraska. I mean, shooting the ball, and you got to be able to do all that stuff. But if you can't stop people, if you can't rebound the ball, if you can't take care of the ball, you're not going to win games. And it's a pretty simple formula to win basketball games, really. And in Nebraska's, they've found a way to do it with their lineup. And I'm excited to see what they can continue to do. But I definitely think I mean, Matt Painter said it. That they're going to beat some people in the Big Ten, and not just here at Pinnacle Bank Arena. After Purdue escaped that game, and I think he's right. The next two games are important. Michigan State's obviously always very tough. And then going to the Breslin Center is not easy. I don't know if Nebraska's even. I think they've won in the Breslin Center maybe one time, if memory serves correct. It could
I'll
be
go look that
wrong,
up while you're still talking. Right now,
but
actually.
that's going to be the next two are really big because there's two road games. At Michigan State and then at Minnesota. And Minnesota's not played very well this year, so that's a very winnable game. So I mean, even if you can just get to 2-3, if you could pull an upset over Michigan State, you have a good chance of being maybe 3-2, and then Illinois is coming into the vault. Next not this coming Tuesday, but January 10th after that. So that's kind of the next three games for Nebraska. Man, if you could find a way to win two out of those three games, you're sitting at 3-3, and that would be a pretty good spot for Nebraska to be in. Like I said, it's going to be tough to make the NCAA tournament. I feel like and I think we're way too early to be talking about that, but 500 season to me has always been the goal. Getting above 500, and maybe getting into the NIT or something. I think that'd be huge for this program, and so winning these next couple of games is going to be big. And I guess the very first goal should be, missing the first, skipping over the first day of the Big Ten tournament because you're not one of the worst four teams. So that would be probably the number one goal, and beating Minnesota is going to be huge in that effort.
And it's also another day of rest if you don't have to play the first day. But to follow up on your thing about Michigan State, they've played at the Breslin Center twice. They won on January 20th, 2016 by a 72-71 margin, and then they won on February 16th, 2014 by a 60-51 margin. So they
Hmm.
have played twice and they've won both times. So I don't know if that's a good omen for the future, but yeah. So no,
It's
but it's not going to
weird.
be
Well,
easy.
it's weird how the schedule works that they haven't played there in 6 years. That's
Well, no,
just.
they have played. They've just lost. Let me see.
Oh, okay.
The last time they played in East Lansing was actually January 5th, and they lost um 79-67.
Oh, okay.
But the last wins
That's right.
were during this time period, yeah.
I got
So
you. But yeah, I think that's going to be a winnable game. Look, this is a style, a brand of basketball that travels pretty well. I think we saw that. They went into Creighton and beat. I know Creighton's had some struggles this year, but beat a team that people thought was going to be pretty good, and they beat them on the road. So we'll see what happens. I mean, that'll be a big test for them, and that's coming up Tuesday. So that'll be a big game, and then at Minnesota next week. So a little bit of a break here for the Huskers, but a well deserved one, and they can kind of enjoy the New Year's holiday feeling good about themselves.
Tuesday we got the All American Bowl, and then we got the basketball. I'm gonna have to my birthday. I'm gonna have to make sure I get all my hours in the day. I'm gonna have to have a full 24-hour day that day. But a lot of exciting things happening on Tuesday and in Nebraska athletics in general right now, and that's something we could say even last year. So things are looking up, hopefully, fingers crossed. And at least with the basketball team, this team is at least fun to watch, and I really like, the effort that they put forth every night.
And really, before we move to football stuff, really quick, we're about midway through this season. We talked about Fred being on the hot seat, obviously, to start the year. I mean, his seat seems like it's getting cooler. I mean, right now, halfway
Mm.
through, what would you keep Fred for another season?
Yeah, because as long as he sticks to this formula of a point guard that can control the game and is not flashy and doesn't try to score and, keep that defensive identity, now there's something where you can say, okay, I can build off this.
Mhm.
There's no more, one and done. Well, there's no more one and dones. I mean, that's the other thing too. Fred has, it seems like Fred has had like 20 rosters in his tenure here. And so if he can just get some consistency and he has a defensive identity. He has that sort of kind of figured out, like you said, what it takes to win in the Big Ten. I would keep him. I really would because there's something to build off here. Now, will it be 30 win seasons? I don't think so, but I think there's a certain ceiling with Nebraska basketball, and as long as Fred keeps winning, I would definitely keep him because, you don't wanna have another, head coach come in and have to restart the process all over again. So and the thing about Fred is that, like, he can recruit.
Yeah.
So and I don't know if another hire could recruit at Fred's level. Now, granted, we haven't always seen the results, but the recruiting has been there for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely, I'd keep him right now for sure. I agree. And, I do worry a little bit with, I mean, they're losing obviously some key players off this team going forward. And, I worry about, the sustainability of being able to kind of meld a team out of the transfer portal. And then that's what they're going to have to do next year. They're going to
Again.
have to, yeah. And, I mean, look, that's what a lot of teams have to do. I mean, Nebraska's not alone, but, you have to be able to mix that strategy and we'll see how that works out. But,
Walker's gone
hopefully,
after this year, right? Walker, Greasel.
yeah, I believe so. I think,
Oof.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's going to be tough. But I still think they got some of the right pieces though, at least the right identity, and you can kind of recruit to your identity. So hopefully they'll keep continuing. I do think that Nebraska, like you said, there is a ceiling to it, but they should be able to compete for 20 wins. I think is kind of my goal for the program long term. At any rate,
Did you see the block that Denham Dawson had at the end of the game? He absolutely got air and just
yeah,
completely swatted the thing right out of the Iowa shooter's hand. That was impressive, and man, that was fun.
yeah,
All of it was fun.
he's a really good defender. So he's got some work to do, but he's definitely a piece I think going forward that has a chance to be a contributor.
Same thing with
Contributor.
Lawrence too, I think. Marcus Lawrence, I think he has a chance to be a contributor as well. So there are some pieces, they just have to develop, but, I think this team is, on the right track and does have some good, young pieces that can develop because, again, the problem it's kinda weird. In basketball, the problem hasn't been, development and recruiting, like it had been for football. It's been just getting wins. It's almost like a role reversal, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how things continue to progress, into Big Ten play. We do have, not a ton of Nebraska, football news here over the past couple of days, but there are a few recruiting updates. We talked, you mentioned it a little bit, the All American Bowl coming up on Tuesday here. Nebraska's expected now to get a couple of commitments out of that game. I mean, it's everybody. Cameron Leonard's, did a couple of interviews, with On3 and 24/7, and basically said that he signed already and he's just waiting for his announcement. All the predictions are basically on Nebraska. Nebraska's a heavy favorite with the On3 prediction machine, so it seems like he is definitely coming. And then Ethan Nation got a crystal ball from Steve Wiltfong, a 24/7 Sports, their kind of lead analyst. So that's a pretty good indicator. It looked like a pretty good, shot for Nebraska as they were the team like, kind of making the strongest push here with, signing day recently. But yeah, it would be a nice boost to this class. Could get them inside the top 20, which would be pretty incredible after where Matt Rule started with this thing.
We're recruiting, Nation as a corner, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Because I was looking at his film at receiver, and he's really good there too. I mean, he's a little bit smaller, 5'11", but he has tremendous athleticism, tremendous speed. I mean, he is just a good all-around athlete, and, I think he'll fit well in the defense. He can come down and make a play quickly. He has good instincts, has good play recognition, is not afraid to come down and make a tackle, so I mean, landing him would be a great fit to the secondary because, we've talked about the versatility that you need to have in the 3-3-5 defense, and Nation certainly has that. He doesn't play like he's walking in cement. He can, fly all over the field.
Yeah, and I think his offer sheet is pretty impressive. I think he's got like over 50 offers or something, and him and Lenhard. It's just kind of their. I think they're victims of the scholarship numbers are a little bit lower in terms of how many incoming recruits teams are signing, with the transfer portal. I think they're trying to keep more spots open, and like Penn State and Michigan State were in it with Cameron Leonard, and then they didn't really make a strong push for him, and Nebraska kind of got back into the mix. So I think, it just shows that sometimes there's just not a spot for everybody, even if they are a good player like a Cameron Leonard or Ethan Nation. And, so it's a great job by Nebraska to get involved in those recruitments late. And, they're both top 500 players with, a lot of big time offers. Leonard's from, played at IMG Academy. So, he's a guy that, could contribute, potentially next year on the defensive line and just is another really solid pass rusher, for this class. So, Um, if you think about, Maverick Noonan, Prince William Emelian, and Cameron Leonard, I mean, that's, three pretty good edge rushers just
I'd
right there.
take
And
those
that's,
3, yeah.
and Dylan Rogers too. I mean, he
Mhm.
doesn't get talked about enough, because he's a little lower ranked, but I really like that guy. And so, I mean, that really bodes well, I think, for the future. And then you add, Ramir Stewart, Nation on the back end. You've got Malcolm Hartzog, who, is going into his sophomore season. So got some, that would give you some nice pieces in the secondary, I think, to work with for Nebraska going forward.
Then you have Riley Van Poppel, I believe, as a defensive lineman. Am I correct on
Yeah.
that?
Yep.
So, I mean, honestly, I'm really excited about him. One of the things our defensive line play was up and down last season, and I think Van Poppel can come in and make an impact. So, I'm excited about this defensive unit all around. I know there's a lot of new pieces that need to be kind of figured out how they fit, but I don't think that process will take long at all.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up Van Poppel because Colton Feast also this week announced that he wasn't going to return. He was a walk on, but basically had like an NIL deal that essentially gave him a scholarship. So that was kind of how that worked. So it's not really opening up a scholarship for Nebraska, which they appear to be about 8 over the. I mean, once if they get these other 2 commitments, they're probably going to be like 8 scholarships over. So I mean, there's going to be some more attrition in the program, and there's going to be some conversations, and some guys are going to be entering the portal here at some point, or that kind of stuff happens behind the scenes. But Colton Feast did play a lot of snaps, and it's interesting that he's moving on. I'm not sure if the staff how that conversation went, or and the same with it's kind of a similar deal with Garrett Nelson. But with him being gone, he's kind of one of those guys that would probably be in the mix to be one of those front 3 defensive linemen. And so I think Riley Van Poppel kind of fits, his size kind of fits, that 3-4, 3-3-5 type scheme. And it wouldn't shock me if he got on the field, pretty early in 2023.
And Colton Feast has also played something like 5 years of football, right? He started on as a walk-on, and then he worked his way into the, starting lineup. So I don't blame him for moving on at all, for sure. I mean, that's a lot of college football. At some point, you know, you it's you kind of got to realize that, maybe I'm not going pro or whatever, or maybe he has, another thing that he wants to focus on. And so I wish him the best. I gave him a hard time at the beginning of the season, but I thought he played much, much better as the season went along. And quite honestly, that whole defensive unit, you know, went went through so much change in between Eric Shenander and then Bill Bush. And I honestly thought Feast was one of the guys that was positively impacted by the change, because I feel like he was able to find his footing a little bit.
Yeah, he did a nice job, and I think he was, he wound up with like double digit pressures, and played quite a few snaps last year. So, finished the career well, and got the win over Iowa at least to end things. Him and Garrett Nelson, so they can at least feel good about the way that they ended their Nebraska football career. And but yeah, it's time for some new blood, and I'm interested to see if there's going to be, obviously there's going to be more departures right now because Nebraska's above the roster limit. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of a ton more additions in the transfer portal. There's been a couple positions we've talked about, tight end, and obviously offensive line is always great. It seems like things have definitely cooled on the Malik Hornsby front. I know he's still kind of talking about Nebraska as being in the mix there, but just doesn't, I don't know, just it's hard for me to see that move happening with the quarterback depth chart and everything else.
Yeah, unless he's coming in as an athlete, I don't see him, coming here. And quite honestly, we have a ton of athletes. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see him coming. I think Jeff Sims was plan 1A and maybe Hornsby was 1B. I
yeah.
mean, I could maybe see him coming in if Nebraska just wants another athlete with speed on the staff, but honestly, I think the quarterback room is pretty much set, and I'll be interested to see, like I said on Monday, how the Thompson Sims quarterback battle plays out, because I do think it's going to be a battle, truthfully.
Yeah, I do. I think I agree with that. I think with the Hornsby, I think you're right that they thought, okay, we've got Casey, and he, worst case, he can start, and then we can use that year to develop Hornsby. He can play 4 games if needed. He could play some wide receiver if we needed him to, but give him a chance to kind of develop for the future, and give him kind of 2 ways to use him. But Sims, it's I always yeah, he was higher on the board, and Matt Rule really likes him. I mean, he said that in his press conference, and Mitch Sherman came out and put his prediction out there, or maybe it was Sean Callahan. Yeah, Sean Callahan said he thinks
Callahan,
that
I think.
you know um, Jeff Sims is going to be the starter. Was blanking there for a second, but Mitch Sherman said that too. He wrote an article, and it basically was to me. He said to me, it looks like that. Jeff Sims is the favorite going into this thing. So I think that I don't know if it's going to be because of the running ability or if he just fits the system better. But I think the ideal option. It's like what if you're a new team in the NFL, and you sign your free agent quarterback, and you're probably going to want that guy to win the job. That doesn't mean that the current guy can't, but he's going to have to impress the staff, and he's going to miss spring ball, so it's going to be tough. But I mean, Casey Thompson's not going to be an easy guy to beat out. I mean, he's thrown the football pretty well, and so I feel good about at least the depth of the room. And the best thing I think is if Casey does win the job, then you still got Jeff Sims, for basically 2 more years. If that's how it works out, and you're able to keep him at Nebraska. You never know with the way the transfer portal works. Maybe he'll transfer after the. I'm just joking, but we've seen it
Well, I
happen
mean, yeah,
before.
yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, it could happen. But I think Jeff Sims fits the type of offense that Matt Rule wants to run a lot better than Casey does. And so I don't think I love to dunk on Sean Callahan and Mitch Sherman as much as the next guy, but I don't think they're too far off base here. I really, really don't. We'll see, and it's all about how Casey heals.
yeah.
Um, heals from his surgery, heals from his injury, and it sucks, but if he doesn't heal quickly or if he's just a little bit off, I mean, Sims is ready and waiting. So we'll see. I was talking about this with somebody the other day, and I've also heard maybe Sims, there's a possibility that Sims could take over at the end of the season if things don't go right. So I think we'll definitely see Sims in the starting role in some capacity next fall. I'm just not sure when and for how many games.
Yeah, it's I mean they got that thing where he could play 4 games next year and still technically use a red shirt. So I don't know if that is an idea. I mean, obviously you don't want to have Jeff Sims start like 6 games and burn a year of his eligibility on that. So that's kind of where I think Nebraska is in a bit of an interesting situation because if you really feel like, okay, if you get through this battle and Jeff Sims and Casey Thompson are basically like 50-50, it's a coin flip, then I think you probably should start Casey Thompson because, with Jeff Sims, you could have him here for 2 more years. I mean, as long as you make sure you have the buy-in and stuff, that's what I would do because, if you
Yeah,
start Jeff Sims this year and then next year he's gone, I mean, and that, and I know that Dylan Rayola's coming and da 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 da, but you got to plan with.
maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Right. I know that's the hope for everybody, but it's like you have to plan for who's on the roster right now.
I just wanted
And
to say maybe to not get people's hopes up because next
yeah.
thing it'll be Chris Peterson said Dylan Raiola is coming. So I
Yeah,
mean, it is
no, I
looking
mean,
like that, but I don't want to. I've been hurt too many times.
so I mean, you can't count on those guys until they're signed, So I mean, you gotta have a plan for your position going forward. And so I mean, if it's tight, you have to read the situation and who's gonna because maybe that would piss off Jeff Sims. You know what I mean? Those are all the decisions that you have to weigh nowadays. But if you got to a point where Casey started the year and then didn't play well, then the last 4 games you could hand it over to Jeff Sims and you still wouldn't burn that year of eligibility. So a lot of different scenarios in play next season for quarterback.
And you got to make sure that whatever decision you make, it's clearly defined. No flip flopping. Oh, I'm going to put Casey in this package, Jeff Sims in that package. I don't think that's going to fly. And so you got to make sure the situation is clearly defined, that everybody is on the same page. I know it sounds like, well, no shit, like, yeah, duh. But I've seen a lot of quarterback situations messed up because the coach doesn't know what he wants to do with two very talented quarterbacks. So whatever they do, it's got to be clearly defined and communicated to all parties involved.
Yeah, exactly. Communication and having a clear plan. It is, it's not going to be a situation where I would be surprised if they use Jeff Sims, in 12 games just as like a gadget wildcat player because again, he could if you could basically have him be your backup next year and then, if something happened like this year that happened in 2022 where he got hurt in the Illinois game and then had to miss 2 starts. Well, Jeff Sims could have played all those games and still maintained his year of eligibility. So that's why I think it's not going to shock me like if Casey Thompson is the starter because of that. But
Hmm.
I mean, I just think the best player is going to play. But if it's a 50-50 split where the staff is like could be, I feel fine with either way. Well, I would try to go with Casey, and I would say, Jeff, you're going to be the guy for the future, and you've got these 4 games this year. We'd like to play you in some capacity, but we're going to have you basically be the number one B, and then you'll be the starter, kind of moving forward. But that's not an easy plan to sell, but that might be a good way to work it out. On the other hand, Casey could stick as the backup, or he could lose that battle and he could say, hey, I want to play my last year of football somewhere else. I'm hitting the portal. I'm skipping the entire 2023 season. Nebraska's done I mean, that happened the first year of Scott Frost when Adrian Martinez won the job. The other dude hit the transfer portal before game 1, and Nebraska was stuck with a walk-on for 2 or 3 games, and it cost us a bowl trip. So I mean, we've seen it happen before. It wouldn't shock me if it happened again.
Quite honestly, it all depends. Like the entire offense depends on the line, because if Casey Thompson, just keeps getting hit and hit and hit and hit like he did last year, then I think Sims better be ready, because I don't know how much. I want his shoulder to be healthy and I want everything to be good, but I don't know how much more it can take. So at some point, either way, I'm telling Jeff Sims, you got to be ready, because I think this line will be better, but um, Jeff Sims, I also think allows for a little bit of mobility out of the pocket, whereas Casey is more, stationary, and that might be something that Matt Rule wants as well in order to just move the offense. I don't think it will be as bad as last year, but you never know. I mean, we've said that about the line. It seems every single season
Mhm.
can't be worse than last year, and yet here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I feel like with getting Ben Scott and getting Teddy Prijat, basically getting a starter back from suspension and one back from injury, and then one in the transfer portal. If all those guys are able to play, I mean, that's essentially getting 3 starting caliber players back that Nebraska didn't have last year. So you add those 3 guys with Corcoran and Benhart. I think Corcoran he'll be fine as a guard. He's at least better as a guard than he is at
Yeah.
a tackle. So I think he'll be better served there. And then you just have to you have to figure out something, get the most out of Benhart, and hopefully they can add another, tackle kind of in the transfer portal. But they added a bunch of freshman offensive linemen, so maybe hopefully they can get those guys up to speed. But I also feel like just having that commitment to the running game is going to help these guys a lot. And I mean, having AJ Allen, we haven't really talked about that much, but he put out a tweet that he's basically coming back, and that was kind of one of my lingering questions. So I think that's huge. Getting him back is one of the biggest news items of the entire offseason, because he's definitely going to be the starting running back at some point. Not Anthony Grant's obviously probably going to start next year, but it's going to be a 1-2 punch. I think like we would have seen that this season. I mean, I think that Anthony Grant was definitely on a path to getting 150, 200 carries in 2022 if he doesn't get hurt.
And it was so good when everybody was healthy. I remember talking with you, and we were just like, "Wow, this could be a very, very good 1-2 punch." And then, unfortunately, Allen got hurt, and Grant was left to, kind of carry the load, literally at the running back position. But having Allen back, I mean, he's just so explosive. He can cut so quickly. He's got speed, and with the linemen and with, a coordinator that will probably commit more to the running game. And I say probably because Mark Whipple didn't commit to it at all, so it can't be much worse. Um, I think Allen will be, in a much better position this year to succeed. And same thing with Anthony Grant. I think, one of the things that I noticed about Rayola's line last year was that even, when they were, not performing well last year, they were still good, or not good, but decent run blockers, in the sense that they blocked downhill a little bit better than they pass blocked. So I'm thinking, that will be much more improved this year, and I can't wait to see what Allen and Grant can do, because that's a dynamic 1-2 combo.
Yeah, it is. And, I just think, everybody on the offensive side of the balls, I just think there's going to be more cohesion. There's not going to be, like you said, Frost and then Whipple and then, Rayola, and they're all trying to do different things. I think, that's one thing with Matt Rule and kind of keeping Rayola on the staff. They have similar philosophies, and that kind of works with some of his other coaches. So hopefully that all, makes a better product this season. But, getting AJ Allen back, massive, for the Huskers. And I mean, you think about an offense that could have, AJ Allen, Thomas Fedoni, Malachi Coleman, Anthony Grant, Marcus Washington. There's a lot of talented football players on this team. Jeff Sims, Casey Thompson. If they can get this offensive line to be productive, this offense look like it's going to be in pretty good shape next season.
And then you think about the depth pieces. We've lacked depth in a couple of years, but just on the offensive side of the ball, you got Bryce Turner, Jalen Lloyd. I mean, absolute burners. Josh Fleeks will probably be fitting in there somewhere. So there's a lot of options that Nebraska has offensively. And I was just thinking the other day, not to dunk on this guy too much, but I remember when Ken Y. Noah was our starting receiver, and he was the leader, and I didn't really think he was that good at the time. But anyway, we've come a long way. Is my point. No more Ken Y. Noahs.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent on this roster, and I like what Matt Rule's been building. Obviously, it's a bit of a dead period, for recruiting. I believe that ends on January 4th, or maybe even the 2nd or whatever, but ends soon this week. So, transfers can start, taking visits. I believe starting next weekend. So things are opening up a little bit. We'll have some, probably more recruiting news, coming with the 2024 class. A bunch of 2024 guys are putting out their top 12 lists, which I think are the dumbest thing in the world. Like, narrow it down to 5 and then come talk to us. Like, come on,
Yeah, I don't
man.
really
Don't
get excited about top. And
that
then I see like top 15, top 20. It's like, oh boy.
even top 8. Like, it's just when I hate that. Put out a top. What I mean, when you're when you're somewhat close to a decision, put out a top 5. Go take your visits and make a choice. I don't need to see a top 15 and then a top 8 and then a top 3.
It's all about the social media,
You
Chris,
know.
though. Come on. You'd be doing the same thing if you were in their shoes. You would be
Probably,
doing.
I probably would, but I guess it gets annoying.
But you know
Anyway,
what? I'm seeing Nebraska on a lot of those lists, so
yeah,
and there
that's a
is
good
something to
thing.
be said for that. I mean, they may not pick us, but we're at least in their minds. So that counts for something, I think, compared to other years where we haven't even been on the radar.
Yeah, it hasn't. I mean, Nebraska's been, putting out a lot of offers in 2024, offering a lot of kids in Texas, like they said they were going to do. I mean, they've pretty much already offered a lot, all the 2024 Nebraska kids. I mean, not everybody, I'm sure, but a lot of the biggest, kids have obviously been, visited and talked to, and they've still been made to be the priority. So, we're all watching for Dylan Raiola, but like I said the other day, let's see what he does for visits before we get, in a tizzy about anything, because he could be taking his official visit list could literally be like Nebraska, Georgia, Clemson, and USC. And then, I'm not saying Nebraska's not going to win that recruitment, but it's far from a slam dunk either. So let's just,
Something tells me that Georgia and Clemson may be able to reel them in a little bit better than us, given their recent history. But I mean, you mentioned Dylan Raiola. I'm looking at a guy like David Hall. I mean, I know we have a lot of talent at wide receiver, but man, he is so good. Can you imagine the the Dylan Raiola connection with Malachi Coleman and David Hall? Like
and
the
Carter
big three
Nelson.
right there, and Carter Nelson. That would be unreal. Now we're dreaming and we're ranting, but I mean, with
Yeah.
this staff, you never know. They work really hard to recruit, and they're not going to rest. Matt Rule said it at his press conference, and he's backing it up. They're not resting until they get as many quality players as possible, and I think that's going to bode well for this next class coming up, especially with a full year in Nebraska under his belt by the time the class signs.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Raiola would be obviously my number one recruit, but Carter Nelson would be right there. He's my favorite player in the 2024 class for the state of Nebraska. So I hope that they get him done out of Ainsworth. It's they need to lock down that recruitment.
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, things definitely trending in the right direction, folks. And to keep track with all their Nebraska football and basketball and recruiting news, make sure you hit the subscribe button for the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. Check out thegreatcornholio.org. Check out huskerbigred.com. Right now we're going on a little bit of an overhaul with huskerbigred.com. So give us a little bit of patience there. We're building up a new site. So, give us a little bit of time there, but you got some great content at thegreatcornholio.org. Also, get into our comments section, like these videos, and, we'll make sure to interact with you. And we'll be back on Monday for, our latest reactions to, some of Nebraska news. And we will talk a little bit more about Ethan Nation and Cameron Leonard and what it could mean for the 2023 recruiting class. So have a
Can't
great
wait.
weekend. Yep, everybody. And Happy New Year. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.